friend.
Hello and welcome to Crypto and Policy. We do this show every other week, and on this show, we discuss everything related to crypto, policy, and for now, the upcoming U.S. election. I am Jen Sanasie, here with my co-host for today, former SEC special counsel and lecturer at UC Berkeley Law, Hermine Wong. She is standing in for Renato Mariotti. Hermine, welcome.
Thank you, Jen. So good to be back. I love this show, and I love hanging out with you.
What a trajectory you've had from guest to guest host. Soon maybe you'll just dethrone Renato and we'll have you on for our own version.
Living the dream. I'm just living the dream right now. So thanks.
All right. On today's show, we're going to be speaking with Logan Dobson from Stand With Crypto and discussing recent news that the SEC Enforcement Director Gerber Graywall is leaving the agency and prediction market Kalshi's win against the SEC. Hermine, I am just really happy to talk to you about these topics, given your experience, but you haven't been on the show for a while. So just curious to hear about what you've been watching from a crypto and policy perspective.
Holy cow, there is so much to be watching. Like, certainly, I think the last time I was on here, we didn't even get to talk about the change in candidates and the full frontal assault that certainly the Harris campaign has been getting ever since the switch from the crypto industry about what is she going to say, what is she not going to say, and then thinking also about how foreign jurisdictions, I was at Korea Blockchain Week about a month ago, and being in thinking about how they're doing things in a non-election year is also super interesting. And certainly the regulatory front has been no shortage of cases, of enforcement cases and settlements. So, and then also CZ got released.
Yeah, a lot has happened. Very true to the crypto ethos, the nature of crypto. It's just a very exciting space. I think things change every day. You mentioned Korea Blockchain Week, and I have to ask you, I think a lot about what the result of the US election means from a global perspective. Did it have such a strong narrative at Korea Blockchain Week, or were folks focused on other things?
People were focused on a lot of other things, actually. Like, there were tons and tons, like a lot of these crypto conferences. Korea Blockchain Week, obviously one of the bigger ones, and there are panels and jam-packed throughout the entire day, but they're not focused on the US at all. There was SEC Commissioner Mark Ueda, who did appear, but otherwise very little US presence. It's a lot more focused on what's being built in the Asia market, and how quickly the Asia market is at adoption.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. We've, of course, seen different regions in Asia progress quicker when it comes to their legislation around crypto. And so that makes a ton of sense. And not a lot of people are talking about what's going on here in the US. It feels like Asia is probably just a few steps ahead of us. But let's get to our first segment of today's show. Like we mentioned, we are just 1 month away from the US presidential election. And while people weren't talking about it at Korea Blockchain Week, it is the topic that we have to hit on here in North America. We are now joined by Executive Director at Stand With Crypto, Logan Dobson. Logan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's awesome to be here and talking to you guys about this.
Of course. Now, before we get into it, I just want to remind our audience who's watching, we are live on CoinDesk's social channels, and you have the opportunity to ask questions alongside Hermine and I. So if you have a question or a comment, please put that below this video, and we will get to some of them throughout the interview. Logan, let's just start it here. We were just talking about Korea Blockchain Week and the U.S. Election not having as much of a prominence over at that conference as it does at some of the conferences here in North America. Does that surprise you? And how are you thinking about the results of the election having a global impact on the crypto industry?
Well, so Stand With Crypto, we are a nonprofit. We are based in the United States. We are completely U.S. focused. So we don't actually have much of an international portfolio. But, the United States in many ways sets, guidelines that other countries sort of look to. I think that, regulations and laws that are passed in the US can have an impact on certainly financial markets, around the country. I mean, the United States is the largest economy in the world. In many ways, it sets a lot of economic trends. A lot of other countries will sort of look to the U.S., sometimes look to the U.S. and go in a different direction, or sometimes look to the U.S. and think that, the U.S. is doing something right. So, certainly when we're talking about the upcoming elections, I think the upcoming elections will have a huge impact on the future of crypto regulation in America. And then I think the future of crypto regulation in America has a huge impact on the growth of, Web3 products, certainly worldwide. Obviously, we at Stand With Crypto are focused on the United States, but it absolutely will have a global impact. And that's, even beyond just sort of asset prices. Those are, you could see, depending on the laws that are passed, they go up, they go down. That obviously affects people nationwide, but I'm talking more about the innovations, about the technologies, about whether or not the United States is a place that is a hub and a home for blockchain technology for these innovative companies, whether they want to build in the United States, or, if we get it wrong, and if, the US is not building a regulatory structure and not building a, welcoming environment for those innovative companies and technologies, then some of that could go overseas, and that would obviously have an impact on international markets as well. Selfishly, we at Stand With Crypto, like we said, we're US based. We want crypto to thrive in America, and we want to thrive worldwide too. But we certainly think that America can and should be the global leader on all this technology, and so that's why we work so hard to make sure that crypto has a future here in our country.
And Logan, do you think that that's the same message that your members in Stand With Crypto, is that what resonates most with them? This idea of the U.S. needs to be the most competitive worldwide, so let's get on board? Or is there something else that they're coalescing around when it comes to crypto?
So Stand With Crypto, we have over 1.5 million people who have signed up with us in the U.S. to be a part of our organization. That's anyone, from folks who have just, signed up for our email updates to folks who have called their member of Congress or called their senator or sent an email to their elected representative to tell them that, they care about crypto and they care about getting this policy right. And those 1.5 million people have a wide array of views. Some of them are, pure Bitcoin folks. Some of them are really interested in building out DeFi. Some of them are interested in one project or another. But I think what really unites them is, like you said, that sort of desire to make sure that crypto can thrive here in America, and is not something that, is outlawed or prosecuted out of existence, and that these technologies can be allowed to deliver what we think are the really transformative and awesome results for everyday people that they can. But we can't do that if we don't get the rules right, if we don't get the regulations right. And many of our members, all of our members, I think, are also interested in protecting consumers and making sure that we're fighting back fraud and taking all those steps to make sure that people can transact in crypto, that people can build crypto products that are safe and do provide benefits to our society. But I think that there is a good amount of frustration at some of the way that crypto has been regulated up until this point, and definitely a desire to see that change and become, a little bit more pro-innovation, pro-building.
Logan, talk to us a little bit about that 1.5 million number. It doesn't seem like a big number. Of course, folks in the industry even on this show, we put a lot of emphasis on crypto in the next election, but 1.5 million compared to the population of the United States doesn't sound like a lot. So talk to us about who those people are and what kind of real impact you think folks who care about crypto can have on the election.
Yeah, absolutely. So 1.5 million, to be clear, is just the people who have signed up with Stand With Crypto. Stand With Crypto is an organization that is approximately 14 months old. So, we are growing every day. We've added, hundreds of thousands of people just over the past couple months, but we do not yet reflect the entire crypto community in America. Various people have put out estimates. The ones that I trust the most seem to indicate that something like 50 million plus people in America own crypto or participate in the crypto ecosystem in some way. So that's that kind of much larger universe that we're talking about that can have a massive effect. But I mean, when you're talking about specifically elections, looking back at 2020 and looking forward to what everybody expects to be a very close election, not just for president, but for Senate and for various House races across the country, when the races are this close and the polling is, tied in, Michigan, tied in Pennsylvania, tied in Arizona, tied in all of these key swing states, there are actually multiple swing states where Stand With Crypto alone, not the broader crypto community, but just Stand With Crypto has more members in places like Arizona and places like Georgia than the margin between the two presidential candidates was in 2020. And so in that case, when elections are this close, even our 1.5 million advocates, who are a large group but not the same size as the full scale of all crypto folks, can have that impact, can swing an election depending on how they vote and who they get behind.
And Logan, one thing that we started this show about was is there a single issue crypto voter? And have you seen that there is evidence of single issue crypto voters breaking through this noise of all the mainstream media polls, right? Like abortion, foreign policy, economy, those are seemingly the big issues. So talk us through some of these members of yours and whether or not there's a single issue crypto voter out there.
Yeah, absolutely. There are certainly some single issue crypto voters. I mean, you don't have to go any further than Twitter to see folks talking about how like crypto is their one issue and it's what they're voting on in November. And that's great. But I'm also totally fine with people who just consider crypto to be, a big part of what they vote on. And I think you've seen that in some surveys where, and we've conducted some as well, where something like 60 to 70% of crypto owners in America consider a candidate's stance on crypto to be important to their vote. And that, that's not unanimous. That's not everyone saying that it's, critically important to their vote, but it is a really significant chunk. And that's kind of on par. So my background is actually in campaigns and elections. I've worked on a lot of campaigns, and it's actually rare that there are any single issue voters on any topic, really. And it's when you're looking for issues that actually have a potent resonance with a voter, that sort of 60 to 70% level is actually about what you're looking for in terms of like people saying that this is actually important to the way I vote. So, I think for most people, even people who are pretty passionate about crypto, they've got other stuff going on in their lives too, and that's totally fine. Who you vote for is a very personal decision. It comes down to a lot of different factors, but what we are seeing from our members and from research of the broader crypto community is that this is a very important issue for these people and does affect how they view candidates and does affect how they're going to vote in November.
We have a question from an audience member here, and it is Stand With Crypto committed to a particular candidate?
So Stand With Crypto is a 501c4, which means we're an educational nonprofit, which means that we can't specifically back individual candidates. Now, there's a small bit of nuance there, which is that Stand With Crypto also has an affiliated PAC. And if you go to our website, standwithcrypto.org, there is an endorsed candidates tab at the top, and you can see some candidates that we have endorsed those are all congressional endorsements, and they're bipartisan, about the same number of Republicans and Democrats, but people who have been strong on crypto in various districts across the country. But for the most part, we view ourselves less as trying to commit ourselves to a particular candidate and more trying to give the crypto community more information and help them make that decision for themselves. So we have a big scorecard on standwithcrypto.org. If you go there, you can see politicians for every office from president down to the U.S. House of Representatives and candidates from both parties. And to the best of our abilities, we can't always catch 100% of things, but we try to log as many of those candidate stances as we can find. And so, you can type in your address or type in a state or type in, a district, and you'll see the folks who represent you. You'll see the people who are running against them, and you can get a good sense of sort of what they have said and whether or not what they have said is pro-crypto or anti-crypto. And I should also note, our scorecard is community driven. So you can actually, on those pages, when you go to someone's page, if you click on their grade underneath their picture, you can submit a new stance. So let's say, some candidate tweeted, "I love Bitcoin," and we happen to not catch it because we're a small and mighty team, and we try to track everything that folks have been saying kind of across the country. You can actually go in and say, "Hey, this person tweeted this," and submit it to us for consideration. We'll look at it, we'll log it, say, "Hey, that's a pro crypto statement." We'll put it on there, and that'll affect their scorecard grade. But we like to view ourselves as more of an educational resource than a group that's pushing a particular candidate. But there are some races where if you pull up the two candidates in the race, one of them has an A on our scorecard and the other has a D or an F. And you are free to draw your own conclusions on what that means and who you should vote for. We're just trying to provide you with the information so that you can make as informed a vote as possible.
Hey, Logan, there is a tactic that a lot of nonprofits in this space do, which is in election years of voter registration drives and then get out the vote initiatives. Is Stand With Crypto doing that? And have you guys seen success? What does that success look like?
I'm so glad that you asked. I would encourage everyone who's watching this, everyone who's listening, please go to standwithcrypto.org/vote. That will take you directly to the Stand with Crypto Voter Center, where we make it really easy to do 3 things. 1, research candidates who are in your district. So put in your address, and we'll show you the scorecard rankings for people in your House race, people in your Senate race if you have one, and in the presidential race. The second thing it allows you to do is check your voter registration. So you just pick your state from a drop-down menu, tell us if you're registered or not. If you are, we help you double check, because a lot of people don't realize, hey, I'm already registered to vote, but I moved last year and I never actually ended up changing my address on my voter registration. So it might be tough for me to actually go into the polling place. So you can check your voter registration, or if you're not registered, we drive you directly to the relevant voting authority who will help you register to vote. Some states you can do it online, some states you can't, but whatever your state's information is, we give that to you so that you can go out and get registered to vote. And I would encourage you to do it quickly. There are a few states in America where the deadline for voter registration is coming up as early as this weekend. So if you're not sure if you're registered to vote, use our tool to check. And then if you're not, use our tool to find out where you can actually go and register to vote, and do that as quickly as possible, please, because we want everyone to turn out and vote in this election. And then the third thing that standwithcrypto.org/vote will help you do is find your polling place, find information about registering to vote. Sorry, not registering to vote, casting an absentee ballot, casting an in-person early ballot. We use resources from an organization called Turbo Vote, which categorizes all of that. So you click on our site, it takes you to the Turbo Vote site. You can get information on absentee, early voting, or finding your polling place on election day. So that is a huge initiative for us. We are putting a ton of our muscle behind it. We want all of our 1.5 million advocates nationwide to turn out to vote this year. And we want to help mobilize the entire crypto community. So even if you're not signed up with Stand with Crypto, we're putting out, get out the vote advertising. We're doing our best to get the word out there so that everyone in the crypto community does turn out and have an impact on this election.
Well, I think that's an important message. Regardless of who you're voting for, you should register. You should get out to vote, and you should check where your nearest polling station is. We do got to wrap it up soon, but there is a question that came in from Jacob Gray. He says he is curious, other than the purchase of a burger and speaking at Nashville, why hasn't crypto, in particular Bitcoin, been mentioned really by either candidate? And I want to add something to Jacob's question. While you were talking, I did go check the scores of both Trump and Harris. Trump has an A on your site, while Harris has not been scored at all. And coming back to Jacob's point, Trump has come out and said some stuff, but what has he actually done? What goes into these scores? And why do you think that these seemingly kind of throwaway comments, flashy events have so much weight?
So what I will tell you about our scores is we can kind of only score what information we have, right? So if you go to, and the nice thing about the scorecard is it's basically completely transparent. If you click on Donald Trump's page, you'll see every statement in there that we have marked and our evaluation of whether it's pro or anti-crypto, because we want to give people as much information as possible. And so when he goes out and, buys pizza using Bitcoin at a bar, that's a pretty pro crypto thing to do, and that's good for us to see, and we're happy to mark it as such. Vice President Harris has in recent days made a couple comments about Web3, about blockchain technology, which has been sort of nice to see. But the feedback from our community and folks that we've been talking to is that despite a couple mentions that we don't feel like we have quite enough information to evaluate where she is on the pro or anti-crypto scale. So that's why she's marked as an NA there. But that's what our scorecard is pretty transparent. I mean, everything that influences the scorecard is right there on the page. You can see all of the statements that have been made for members of the House or for members of the Senate. There are also some votes. There haven't been a ton of crypto votes in Congress over the past couple of years, but the ones that have been in there are marked, and they do influence the scorecard. But what I will say is that I would hope that the crypto community can kind of take a little bit of a victory lap, because it only, 4 years ago, neither candidate was talking about crypto at all. And then this year you have, the one candidate who's made, a good number of statements in Trump, and we've marked them as at least somewhat pro crypto. And Kamala Harris, to her credit, is talking about blockchain. She is talking about Web3. She's talking about this kind of innovative stuff in a way that even 4 years ago would have been unthinkable. So I know that the pace of progress can sometimes not quite be as fast as folks would like to see, but at least on our end, and even leave the presidential behind. Like there are so many more House candidates and members of the House of Representatives, Senate candidates and senators who are talking about crypto, who are talking about this technology and the influence that it can have in a way that even just a few years ago would have been crazy to think. And so it makes me excited for, what's it going to be 4 years from now? Are we going to have crypto focused, questions at presidential debates? Are we going to have, crypto presidential forums? We at Stand With Crypto held one earlier this year. And a couple candidates showed up, and that's awesome. And we're grateful for that. But like, will that be something that every major candidate feels like they need to have a position on in 4 years? I think probably.
All right, Logan, we are going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining our crypto and policy show. And I know you're going to be doing some other things around CoinDesk.com. So we'll see you there.
Well, thank you guys so much. Again, the number one thing, if anybody takes something away from this conversation, please go to standwithcrypto.org/vote, check your voter registration, find out where you can cast your ballot this fall, and make sure you turn out. That's what we all got to do.
Thanks, Logan.
Thank you.
All right, Hermine, it is just the two of us to talk about everything else, crypto and policy. Yes. Before we get into it, I meant to ask you, I know that you are a lecturer at UC Berkeley. That's how I introduced you. Have your students been asking anything? Like, what are your students saying about crypto and the upcoming elections, if anything?
Sorry, Jen, cut out for a second. That's probably my side. Can you repeat the question?
That's all right. These things often don't work when we need them to. We've all experienced slow internet. What are your students saying or asking about crypto and the elections, if anything? Is it a hot topic?
It's a hot topic for my students. So at UC Berkeley Law School, I teach on crypto regulation and policy. So they're very interested in knowing how crypto can affect this election and why should it affect this election, right? These are law school students. So they're thinking about like, why does it affect the elections? And if it does, what does that mean for the laws coming up? And they're learning about obviously the appointment process, right? For agencies, how legislation controls over any sort of rulemaking agenda, but a rulemaking agenda is slow. Legislative process can be fast or it can be even slower. So these are the kinds of things that they're muddling through right now in terms of our branches of government. But it is top of mind for them because it's top of mind on the news.
Totally. I mean, I think as we go through our next stories, we might start to answer that question, why does it matter and what happens from here? And so let's get to our next story. We are talking about prediction market Kalshi. As you know, Kalshi resumed listing its contracts on the upcoming election after the U.S. Court of Appeals denied a motion by the CFTC to halt the contracts, which paused activity for some time. The judge said that the commission had failed to demonstrate that it or the public will suffer irreparable injury absent a staying appeal, and therefore the CFTC's motion was denied. A clock on Kalshi's website indicates that the presidential contract will launch this afternoon. Now, Hermine, we got to talk about this, but first, I think we should just lay a foundation for our audience who might not have been following the story very closely. Very quickly, take us on the Kalshi versus the CFTC journey. How did we get here?
Yeah, it's a journey years in the making. This is not something that's just happened in 2024. So before, the CFTC had issued no action relief for Kalshi. So no action relief in regulatory terms means that back in the day, pre-2021, the CFTC said, look, Kalshi's business that it does is something that we don't think we really quintessentially regulate. So we want to give clarity by saying we're not going to enforce against you. That was their version of clarity. No need to do a big rulemaking. We're just saying that for you, we're not going to recommend enforcement action. Then a couple years pass and they take away the no action relief. And so then Kalshi then files to register its contracts with the CFTC. And after the 90-day period, the CFTC, according to party lines, the commission votes to not let them list as a market maker on the CFTC's registered list. And Kalshi then sues. So now we're in this post 2023 litigation with Kalshi, and Kalshi won at the district court level, and then the CFTC appealed that and said, look, we're going to have problems if we have to let them operate, and you need to give us an emergency stay. This is different than saying make a determination on Kalshi's business. And in fact, if you read the order itself from the DC circuit, the appellate circuit, they're saying like, look, it's a tough call on the business, and we haven't actually delved into the merits of this. But irreparable harm, just like you said, Jen, that's actually a much higher threshold, right? We often allow businesses to operate without saying that you have to shut down that line of business. And so in this case, the DC Circuit is saying, we don't buy the argument that we need to shut down this business because the public interest is going to be harmed so much by allowing bets on who controls Congress.
Okay, so what does that mean from here? Is there some kind of precedent that can be set, or is there still a journey to go to have platforms like Kalshi be more open to the US market? And I immediately think of Polymarket, which is not available to US citizens. So what happens to here? Like, are we going to see the CFTC and Kalshi go back and forth while they are able to offer these contracts, or are we going to see more platforms like this enter the US market?
It's hard to tell, right? This is about risk tolerance for these other markets because they know that the CFTC, at least with this current makeup of the commission, right, a 3-2 Democrat Republican break, this commission does not like this business, and it's going to keep on litigating until rulemaking that survives litigation actually works. And those are years-long processes. But if you're willing to, you're like, look, that my business is going really fast and I've got a lot of adoption, maybe you're willing to foot the bill for a lot of litigation while you're able to operate. The one thing that we know is that the DC Circuit is not going to stop you from being able to operate while we go through this litigation process.
Now, we know that the CFTC has been considering a proposed rule. It's not been finalized. There's been a lot of debate about this proposed rule in this industry. And the rule would ban election betting at all futures exchanges. Talk to me a little bit about this proposed rule. What needs to happen to make it something that is enforceable? And again, I know we talked a little bit just now about timelines, but what does the timeline look like? And let's come back to the election. Does the election affect this?
Okay, well, lots of questions.
I know, I'm just firing them at you.
Let's unpack it, right? I will say that the TLDR for this particular rulemaking is going to be sometimes when an industry asks for regulatory certainty or regulatory clarity, they may not like the outcome. This is going to be one of those instances where the CFTC's proposed rulemaking is really clear and it's saying, we're going to ban it, right? Like, so, and that's very clear and that's very certain, but it's not the outcome that the industry might say, hey, we want regulatory certainty with. Now, having said that, there's a lot of moving pieces. How long might something like this take? It could take 18 to 24 months. That's pretty typical time period to go from proposed rulemaking to final rulemaking. Once it becomes final, that's considered a law that can be enforceable until a court says it's not. So like, they put a little asterisk there. That process could be even faster or slower. It could be faster because it's priority for the commission. I doubt that this is a big priority for the commission, so I suspect it'll be on the normal timeline. It could be a lot longer, though, depending on the number of public comments it receives, right? So if you get 100 public comments from the public, that's very different than responding to 5,000 public comments and having to sift through all of them, categorize them. So that could also delay a final rulemaking. I said until a court says otherwise, let's unpack that little asterisk there. So depending on what that outcome of the final rule is, which we don't know because we all see is a proposed one right now, the final rule, someone will likely sue, and it could be the people who are for this or against it. You could see that there might be nonprofit advocacy organizations who don't like an outcome that allows for this kind of election betting, and so they'll sue based on that. So that might take another couple of years to resolve. That doesn't mean though, that the businesses can't operate during that period, but it might also mean that they're spending a lot of their revenue on litigation as opposed to their business.
All right, I want to
Oh, and
remind.
again, I forgot.
Yes, tell
I forgot
me.
to answer your last
Tell me.
question, the election.
Yes.
Right? So how can the election affect this? This election could affect it a lot because the president, whoever that president is, will get to appoint whoever will be chair most likely. And so that could also determine, and it'll also depend on who controls Congress. The who controls Congress is something else that will determine the makeup of the commission. Whether or not it goes 3-2 Democrat or 3-2 Republican.
Is there any indication, and this is something that you may have absolutely no idea about, but I got to ask, is there any indication of who might be appointed to that position if Trump takes the presidency or if Harris takes the presidency, or is that just something we got to wait and see?
You know what? That is absolutely something we're going to have to wait and see. And I'll say a good example is the current chair. Chair Benham was not the first choice for the CFTC chair and the Biden administration. But of all the Senate confirmed appointments, there's a lot of horse trading that goes on when a president is elected. And so some of the big ticket appointments that they want, like, the Treasury Secretary, Secretary of State, those ones will get a lot of attention. And then there's a lot of horse trading on these kind of secondary appointments. And the CFTC chair was one of them. And so Benham ended up becoming CFTC chair because the first choice wasn't the one that could get through Senate confirmation.
I want to remind our audience, if they have any questions for you about any of the stories that we're covering, they can put them in the comments. We are live right now across all of CoinDesk's social channels. Before we move on to the next story, Hermine, for folks who participate on platforms like Kalshi, for people who want to go on and bet on the different contracts that are made available, is there anything that they should be watching or that they should be concerned about as the CFTC explores this proposed rule?
Well, one, it's something that I think would be really exciting and great is if people actually provide comments to the CFTC proposed rule, right? So if you're actually in this area, what the CFTC has said that is really tough for them about this particular market is that if they were to become the cop on the beat for it, they would have to then investigate whether or not fraud is happening on the underlying election market, right? Or election and not the market. But then, because that's their job. Their job is to deter fraud in any of the markets that they oversee. And they're not equipped to do that. That's not in their statutory mandate. That's what their claim is right now. So if you disagree with that and you think, no, CFTC, maybe you've misinterpreted the statute. That's not what you have to do at all. You just have to do X. Tell them that, or tell them like, hey, no, you should absolutely do this. And this is how you do it. All sorts of ways where you could get yourself involved in that process to influence the outcome of this rulemaking.
All right, let's move on to our last story of the day, and that is all about the SEC. So we're moving from the CFTC to the SEC. SEC Enforcement Director Gurbir Grewal is leaving the agency. His last day is going to be October 11th. Deputy Director Sanjay Wadha will take over as acting enforcement chief. Just curious, from your experience at the SEC, how you're reading this story. Is this indicative of something larger, more changes at the SEC, or is this business as usual?
You know what? I know that the audience is going to hate this, but it's actually really business as usual. And this is why, right? If we look back at the tenures of enforcement directors, they are 3 to 4 years. It's just like 3 to 4 years lockstep. You'll see that whether or not it's Stephanie Avakian, Stephen Paikin, Andrew Seresny. I'm just listing the ones that have been recently there, and that's like 3 to 4 years. They also, I know that there's been a lot of chatter about how long Grewal has to leave, right? They're like, oh my gosh, it's only 9 days. The way that government employment works is that they can't start backfilling anyone until that person actually leaves. So you can't look at, so again, if you look back at the notices for previous enforcement directors, it's generally somewhere in that 2-week window that they have because you want to roll off at the end of a pay period, or else it's going to be something like the end of the month or the end of the year. This is all very typical and lockstep of what what would happen. And then this allows for Director Graywall to start looking for other opportunities publicly, because now everyone, that window of like, is he staying? Is he going? Like, let's say, for example, he had said, I'm going to stay for another 6 months. You could see a lot of lobbying in front of him to do certain things based on what a potential employer might or might not say. And that's just not a position we want our civil servants to be in.
So it's just business as usual. I'm sure the crypto audience, that's not what they wanted to hear.
Hate it. I know.
In the space. Okay, but let's talk about this. Under Graywall's tenure, the SEC authorized more than 2,400 enforcement matters, leading to over $20 billion in disgorgement and civil penalties. I think there were more than 100 enforcement actions addressing widespread non-compliance in the crypto space. What happens to enforcement actions that are ongoing now that he's leaving? Is that business as usual? Is there could the incoming director change course on those?
Yeah. So this is the way that a government agency works. We when a political appointee leaves, the staff underneath immediately take over as acting, and so let's imagine that the acting right now is already in place. First line of business is to, again, keep business as usual. We want our government agencies to have a consistency that doesn't depend on necessarily who's in office, right? The public needs that kind of consistency. This is generally what they're going to do. This particular acting comes from NIRO, the New York regional office. That's, for the crypto industry, this is significant because that's where most of our crypto cases come out of, is this New York regional office. His history is also from the market abuse unit, one that also has a lot of experience in investigating crypto cases. So I don't see that he would let up from anything that this current Gensler commission has set its path on. And let's be clear that the enforcement director may have director behind their name, but they report as a straight line to the chair.
That makes a lot of sense.
The agenda.
Yeah. So I guess my last question here to wrap this up, from your experience, I mean, what are the biggest challenges facing the incoming enforcement director?
It's going to be actually how much to do before this election happens, and then what to do in that period of transition, whatever the transition that is, whether or not it's from Biden to a Trump administration or Biden to a Harris administration. So that, I think, is, you don't want to, as any enforcement director right now, make big waves that could actually tilt any outcome for the election. And you also don't want to tip your hand, because these are civil servants. You don't want to tip your hand that you're for or against any particular candidate either. And so you don't want anything that you do to suggest otherwise.
In my interviews on CoinDesk, I've heard folks from both the Republicans and the Democrats say that SEC Chair Gary Gensler should be replaced. After the election, do you think we're going to see Chair Gensler get replaced, regardless of who wins? And if so, how long does that kind of process take?
So I think that my dog Stella has very strong feelings about this, if you can hear her in the background. So she's probably heard the name Gensler a lot of times in my own conversations, just casually. And I think that it's probably true that we're going to see a shift in the chair of the SEC. I would not be surprised at all. And part of that is just, Vice President Harris had her own history in the Senate. She also has a long history of people that she's been around. She's going to want to appoint people in that space. And it's not clear to me that there is a direct line between Gensler and the Harris administration. And certainly there's no world in which Gary Gensler is sticking around in a Trump administration. Like, he'll quickly resign before Trump takes office. So I don't think that we're going to be seeing a Gary Gensler second chair.
Hermine, we have reached the end of our show. I know. Thank you so much for co-hosting with me
This
today.
was so much fun. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Of course. And thank you to our audience for watching. We do this every other week. We are live across all of CoinDesk's social channels. I am Jen Sanasie. That is Hermine Wong in for Renato Mariotti this week. We will see you in